You're watching Narrify.
The night my car broke down felt insignificant at first, like one of those small inconveniences you curse and forget. But looking back, it was the moment everything revealed itself. Because my BMW sat useless in the garage with a transmission issue I didn't want to rush fix. And instead of calling a cab or rescheduling the date, I borrowed my friend Arjun's old Honda Civic, a faded silver model with a dented door and fabric seats that smelled faintly of engine oil and coffee. And I told myself it didn't matter, that a car was just a car, that anyone worth knowing wouldn't judge a man by the wheels he arrived in. But I underestimated how quickly people make decisions about your value when they think you have none. Her name was Ria, and we had been talking for a few weeks, long enough to establish interest but not long enough for truth to surface naturally. And just like with most people, I kept my life simple on purpose, never mentioning that I owned a BMW parked behind locked gates, never mentioning the investments, the quiet money, the stability, because experience had taught me that money changes how people look at you before they ever learn who you are. So when I pulled up outside her apartment in that old Honda, engine rattling slightly as I put it in park, I saw the shift immediately, the way her smile paused half a second too long, the way her eyes flicked down toward the car and then back up to my face like she was recalculating something she hadn't planned for. And she got in. Without a word, no compliment, no greeting beyond a flat "hey." Scrolling on her phone as if I were an Uber driver rather than the man she'd agreed to have dinner with, and I told myself again that it didn't matter, that I was imagining it, that first impressions were tricky things. But as we drove, the comments started slipping through in that passive, joking tone people use when they want plausible deniability. Asking things like, "This is your car?" With a smile that wasn't quite kind. Laughing when I nodded and saying, "Wow, vintage?" Then adding, "I didn't know you were into economical living." And when I replied calmly that it was temporary, she raised an eyebrow and said, "Sure," dragging the word out like it meant something else entirely. And by the time we reached the restaurant, a mid-range place she'd chosen because she said it was cute but not too fancy, she was already distant, already leaning away from me, already typing messages to someone else as if I weren't sitting beside her. And when her friend Anika joined us inside, things escalated quickly because Anika took one look at me, one look at the Honda visible through the glass, and smiled the way people do when they've decided you're beneath them, and she asked loudly what I did for work, not out of curiosity but as a setup, and when I answered vaguely saying I worked in management, she laughed and said, "Management where? Like retail?" And Ria laughed, too, not correcting her, not defending me, just laughing softly like it was harmless fun. And from there, the evening became a series of small cuts, comments about ambition, about men who drive nice cars, about how stability mattered to women at this age. All while they spoke around me instead of to me, ordering drinks without asking if I wanted anything, discussing travel plans that excluded me, speaking openly about how hard it was to find men who were on their level. And at one point Anika leaned in toward Ria and said, not quietly enough, "You could do better, you know?" And Ria didn't disagree. She just shrugged and said, "He's nice." The way someone might describe a temporary solution rather than a partner. And I sat there calm on the outside while something settled deep inside me. Not anger exactly, but understanding. The kind that locks into place when you finally see the truth without emotion clouding it. Because in that moment I realized she wasn't reacting to a car. She was reacting to what she thought my future looked like. Small, limited, unimpressive, and she was already adjusting her respect. Accordingly, already treating me like someone she was doing a favor by tolerating. And when the bill came and I paid without hesitation, without checking prices, without flinching, Anika looked surprised for a moment before covering it with a joke about splurging once in a while. And Ria said nothing again, just picked up her bag and walked ahead of me as we left, not waiting, not thanking me, and outside by the car, she paused and finally said it. The sentence that sealed everything, the one delivered casually but weighted with judgment. "You know, I didn't expect you to be this simple." And when I asked what she meant, she smiled thinly and said, "It's fine, not everyone needs to aim high." And that was when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding, wasn't bad communication, wasn't nerves or a bad night, it was character, because she believed she was superior to me, believed she was settling, believed she could speak down to me because she thought I had nowhere else to stand. And as I drove her home in that old Honda, the engine humming steadily like it didn't care about human ego, I decided I wouldn't correct her, wouldn't explain, wouldn't reveal anything yet, because people deserve to be judged by the truth they show when they think no consequences exist, and she was showing me hers freely, unaware. That the man she was dismissing, the man she thought drove an old borrowed car because that was the best he could do, was the same man who owned a BMW she'd never sat in, a life she'd never been invited into, and a future she had already disqualified herself from without even knowing it. The days after that first date unfolded like a quiet trial I hadn't agreed to participate in, where every interaction became another opportunity for Rhea to measure me against an invisible standard she never spoke aloud but enforced relentlessly, because once someone decides you are less, they start treating you like an inconvenience disguised as a favor, and that's exactly what happened when she began responding slower, canceling plans last minute with excuses about being busy or tired, yet still expecting me to adjust my schedule instantly when she wanted something. And when we did meet again, it was always on her terms, her locations, her timing, and always with subtle reminders of what she believed I lacked. Like pointing out expensive cars passing by and saying things like, "That's the kind of drive I see myself in." One day, or casually mentioning how her cousin's boyfriend had just bought a luxury apartment and how ambition is attractive. Always followed by a quick glance at me to see if the message landed. And it always did, though not in the way she intended, because instead of insecurity, it gave me clarity. The kind that strips illusions away cleanly and permanently. And one evening when I suggested cooking dinner together at my place, she laughed and said, "Maybe when you have a place that feels more established." A word she stretched thin like it carried moral weight, and I nodded calmly, not because I agreed, but because I was observing, collecting, understanding, and the next time we went out, she invited Anika again without asking me, treating me less like a date and more like background logistics. And that night was worse because Anika had clearly already been briefed, asking pointed questions about my career growth, my long-term financial vision, my backup plan, each one framed as curiosity but sharpened by judgment. And when I answered with measured restraint, never defensive, never boastful, Anika scoffed and said, "You're very relaxed about life." And Rhea nodded in agreement, adding, "Some people are just comfortable staying where they are." And that was the moment I realized she didn't just think I was poor. She thought I was complacent, unambitious, someone to be tolerated until something better appeared. And yet she continued seeing me, not because she respected me, but because I made her feel superior, because dating me let her feel like the prize, like the one doing charity work with her affection. And that dynamic fed her ego in ways she didn't even bother to hide anymore, correcting me in public, interrupting me mid-sentence, dismissing my opinions with phrases like, "You wouldn't get it," or "That's not really your world," as if she had already categorized my entire existence based on a borrowed car and my refusal to advertise my wealth. And the worst part wasn't the insults themselves, it was how natural they felt to her, how unguarded, how confident she was that I would accept them, because she believed I needed her more than she needed me. And one night, sitting across from her at a bar she insisted on because it was where successful people hang out, she leaned back after 2 drinks and said, "You know, I like that you're not intimidating." And when I asked what she meant, she smiled and said, "Some men with money get egos, but you're manageable." And that word landed heavy, because it wasn't accidental, it was chosen, and I realized she didn't see me as a partner. She saw me as a placeholder, someone safe to control until she found someone richer, louder, more impressive, and yet she still expected loyalty, still expected effort, still expected me to listen when she complained about how hard her life was, how expensive things were, how unfair it felt that she had so much potential, but not enough opportunity, all while speaking to me like I was proof of what she didn't want to become. And the final crack came the night my friend Arjun joined us for drinks, because Arjun knew everything, knew about the BMW, the properties, the investments, but played along effortlessly. And when Rhea and Anika started making jokes again about my simple lifestyle, Arjun raised an eyebrow and said casually, "You know he just chooses to live quietly, right?" And Rhea laughed sharply and said, "Sure, that's what everyone says," dismissing him without a second thought. And that was when I saw it clearly, that no amount of truth offered gently would be accepted, because she didn't want the truth. She wanted the hierarchy she had built in her head, where she stood above me, where she had leverage, where she could feel secure without earning respect. And as the night ended and she criticized the Honda again, saying, "You should really think about upgrading if you want to be taken seriously," something settled inside me fully, not anger, not revenge, but finality, because I understood that people don't accidentally show contempt. They reveal it when they believe you're powerless to respond. And she believed that completely, unaware that every insult, every dismissal, every casual cruelty was closing a door she didn't even know existed, because the truth wasn't that I owned a BMW she'd never seen, or money she'd never touched. It was that I owned my self-respect, and that was something she would never have access to, no matter how much she thought she deserved more than the man sitting quietly across from her, watching, waiting, and deciding exactly when the illusion would end. The end didn't come with shouting or dramatic confrontations. It came with inevitability, the kind that feels almost gentle once you accept it, because by the time part 3 began, I had already emotionally stepped out of the role she'd assigned me, and all that remained was to let reality catch up at its own pace, which it did on a night she invited me to a networking dinner with some of her colleagues, a place she described as exclusive, important, the kind of room where real connections are made. And I arrived in the same borrowed Honda, same simple jacket, same calm expression, because nothing about me had changed except my certainty, and the dinner unfolded exactly as expected, with introductions that skimmed over me quickly, conversations that pivoted away once my job was mentioned, subtle glances exchanged between her friends when I spoke too confidently for someone they assumed had nothing, and Rhea herself slipping further into a version of superiority she no longer bothered to mask, interrupting me to explain things I already knew, correcting details I intentionally kept vague, laughing a little too loudly when someone asked what I drove, and when one of her colleagues joked, "Well, at least he's humble," she smiled proudly, as if humility were a flaw she'd generously tolerated. And it was in that moment, surrounded by people who believed status was proven by noise and labels, that I realized the reveal didn't need theatrics, it needed timing, and timing arrived when the valet manager approached the table mid-dinner, visibly tense, apologizing for the delay in vehicle arrangements and addressing me by name, asking quietly if I'd like the BMW brought around or if I preferred to leave it parked overnight in the executive lot. And the table went silent in a way silence only does when assumptions shatter, because Rhea laughed instinctively at first, a short confused sound, before looking at me, then at him, then back at me again, her smile freezing as reality recalibrated too quickly for her to control. And I nodded calmly and said, "The BMW is fine, thank you." As if this were the most ordinary sentence in the correcting details I intentionally kept vague, laughing a little too loudly when someone asked what I drove, and when one of her colleagues joked, "Well, at least he's humble," she smiled proudly, as if humility were a flaw she'd generously tolerated. And it was in that moment, surrounded by people who believed status was proven by noise and labels, that I realized the reveal didn't need theatrics, it needed timing, and timing arrived when the valet manager approached the table mid-dinner, visibly tense, apologizing for the delay in vehicle arrangements and addressing me by name, asking quietly if I'd like the BMW brought around or if I preferred to leave it parked overnight in the executive lot. And the table went silent in a way silence only does when assumptions shatter, because Rhea laughed instinctively at first, a short confused sound, before looking at me, then at him, then back at me again, her smile freezing as reality recalibrated too quickly for her to control. And I nodded calmly and said, "The BMW is fine, thank you." As if this were the most ordinary sentence in the world, because for me, it was, but for her, it was catastrophic, the room suddenly filling with questions no one asked out loud, eyes flicking between us, her friends' expressions shifting from smug amusement to discomfort, to embarrassment, to something dangerously close to envy, and Rhea leaned toward me, whispering sharply, "What is he talking about?" And I answered just as quietly, "My car," and she stared at me like she was looking at a stranger, like the ground had moved beneath her feet without warning, and the rest of the evening passed in fragments, people suddenly engaging me with new interest, asking different questions, offering business cards, laughing at things they hadn't laughed at before, while Rhea sat stiff, her identity crisis unfolding in real time, because the man she thought she had power over had never been beneath her, and the superiority she fed on had never existed. And when we finally walked outside, the BMW waiting under soft lights like punctuation at the end of a sentence she couldn't rewrite, she snapped, accusing me of lying, manipulating her, embarrassing her on purpose, and I listened without interrupting, because this wasn't anger, it was panic, the panic of someone realizing they misjudged the one variable they thought was fixed. And when she finally asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" I answered honestly, because you never asked in a way that showed you'd respect the answer. And that was when her anger collapsed into something smaller, uglier, defensiveness mixed with regret, apologies tangled with excuses, claims that she would have treated me differently if she'd known. And that sentence alone confirmed everything, because love that requires credentials isn't love, it's negotiation, and I told her gently but firmly that the problem wasn't her not knowing about the BMW, it was how she treated me when she thought I had nothing, how easily respect disappeared when she believed I couldn't offer status in return, and she cried, said she felt stupid, said she felt judged, said she felt like I had tested her, and I didn't deny it because sometimes tests are just life revealing truth faster than people expect. And I told her we were done, not because she insulted me, not because she laughed, but because she showed me exactly who she was when she thought I was powerless. And I drove away alone that night, not with satisfaction, not with revenge, but with peace, because there is a rare clarity that comes from watching someone lose interest in you the moment they believe you have nothing, and then watching that same interest return when they think you have everything, and understanding that neither version was ever about you, it was about them. And as I merged onto the road, the BMW humming quietly beneath me, I thought about how often people confuse wealth with worth, how quickly kindness disappears when status seems absent, and how revealing it is when someone treats a borrowed Honda like a verdict on your value. And I knew then that the real lesson wasn't that I owned a better car, it was that I never needed to prove anything at all because the right person wouldn't have cared what I drove, and the wrong one had already driven herself out of my life the moment she chose disrespect over curiosity. And that was the end, not with drama, not with shouting, but with the quiet certainty that I had lost nothing of value and gained something far more important. The knowledge that self-respect, once chosen, never needs to be explained.